Welcome to Show Me Sports Legacies. I'm your host, Jeff Crowley. I'm here with my co-host, Chris Augenfels, and we're going to do something a little bit different today. So talk us through the definition of sport.
Well, as we enter our John Riggins episode, if you know, number 44, we're going to venture off the beaten path a little bit and talk about a sport we don't normally talk about. But then I got to thinking, what is the definition of sport? So I looked it up in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and the definition of sport is, as a noun, a source of diversion, such as recreation, or a particular activity so engaged in. Sport as a verb, to engage in a sport or to amuse oneself. So I think our topic today fits those categories. We have had so far, if you look back at our episodes, we've covered sports like baseball, softball, football, wrestling, golf, tennis, running, Olympics, officiating. We've covered topics like youth sports, sports in the media, sports administration, sports Hall of Fames, sports fandom. But in all of our topics that we've talked about, there are themes that kind of come back. And those are hard work, dedication, dreams, practice, what it's like to be a champion. And today's topic is going to check all those boxes.
Okay, so you know the old saying, what in the wide world of sports is going on here? We're going to talk about something today that was very popular specifically in the 80s. It really kicked up in a big way in the public consciousness. And right by your right elbow is a new little gadget thing in here. And it says CR Flamingo. You see that?
I see it, and you're going to tell me about it.
Okay, that is a soccer, what do you call it? A soccer scarf.
Okay.
A soccer scarf.
I'm with you.
Brought back from Rio de Janeiro by my daughter. And what does that have to do with Missouri sports? It has nothing to do with Missouri sports, but it's beloved in Brazil. And it's in the studio, at least for now, as a kind of a runner for the Emmy to sit on. And it's just like we keep bringing threads in, keep bringing things in, and it makes it fun. It makes it bigger. And like you say, it has these themes that are threads that run throughout all these stories. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And we are going to talk about a different part of the sports world, new and different to the podcast, but not to millions of fans of tractor pulling. Born from the world of farms and farm machinery, it is a way of life for many that starts in childhood. Some, including our guests tonight, live that life throughout their working and adult life and know intimately the ways of county and state fairs and competitions. Even fewer pursue the tractor pulling and modification of farm machinery for a high-level competition to the point beyond a hobby, to a point that could be described as a passion, could be described as obsessive in some way. Tonight we have as our guest Adrian Cox of Trenton, Missouri, and we're happy to have him. Adrian is fresh off the biggest victory of his tractor pulling career at the National Farm Machinery Show Championship Tractor Pull in Louisville, Kentucky at Freedom Hall. Now, listeners may not know much about it, but that is a huge deal, and we're going to explore that in this episode. Along with Adrian, we have our friend, one of the podcast's farming experts, and Lord knows we need it, Chris. Farming expertise is not in our wheelhouse completely. So we have Brad Tolson with us tonight. And Brad's father, Alan, was a serious puller, so he knows about the world of tractor pulling. I would imagine he got drug along to a lot of events of that type when he was growing up, has been around it. So welcome, Adrian, and welcome, Brad, to the podcast.
Thank you.
We are glad to have you here to drop some knowledge on us and on our podcast audience. Adrian, right off the bat, I want to start with your beginning days of farming and working with farm machinery. I found an article from 1985 in the Trenton Republican Times, and he's already laughing as he knows where I'm going with this. There was a 14-year-old farm kid in this article that was the focus of it, and this kid had some plans. He had specific goals. He had goals to have 20 sows, 100 feeder pigs, 400 acres of corn, 200 acres of milo, 200 acres of beans, 10 head of cattle without going broke, which I think was the key part of that statement. He was already running his own business, the Coyville Implement Company. Adrian, tell me about that 14-year-old kid.
Well, you're taking me back quite a little ways there, Jeff. You could have given me a little warning on that one. When you're in the newspaper, I guess it's always going to be there for somebody to find later in life and pick on you about it a little. I was pretty ambitious. When you think about those acres, I had the first thing that you said that really stuck out to me was the 200 acres of milo. I surely outgrew that right off the bat. I hate that stuff. It's terribly itchy to grow, but I was very, I remember when the gal came out and interviewed me a long time ago. The reason she did that was because I would go around to all the neighbors as you saw in that article, and gather up some old horse-drawn equipment and kind of restore it, paint it up. My grandpa helped me because he remembered it, in his young days of farming that way. And we got that old equipment out, and I think in that there's a picture there that was in the paper back then. Had like some plows and some stuff that I'd drug out of the brush and restored up, and that was all out in our front yard. And I called it the Coyville Implement Company back in what would that have been, 84 or 83? Whenever you
85.
85. Okay. I see.
You're a freshman in high school. I mean, we joke about these kind of things, but we all have these dreams, and a lot of times it doesn't get captured in an article. What we were thinking at 14, which is probably good in my case. But you made it clear that farming was the best job in the world, in your opinion, and you couldn't wait to get to it. As soon as you got your diploma, you said you were going to get after it in that article.
Absolutely. That is one thing that I think most of my friends in school knew about me was I was probably going to farm. Now, I think I actually remember I was voted most likely to farm, not succeed. That remained to be seen, but nevertheless, they were teasing me about that. Everybody kind of knew that I would. I had a passion for it. I wanted to do what my dad did, what his dad did, and his dad did as long back as I can remember. They were all farmers, and I kind of wanted to carry on that tradition.
You probably can relate to that, Brad.
Yeah, I think honestly, for me, I might have been voted least likely to farm. The 80s were a tough time, and Adrian and I both graduated in 89, and everybody had been through a tough time. And I doubt if everybody was like egging you on and telling you that was maybe the best path that anybody could ever take. But I think that you knew all along that that's what you were going to do, and that's really cool. I've always wondered, how you got started with the pulling, and it sounds like you were already like restoring equipment and all of that stuff even when you were a young teenager, and how you got your mechanical ability. I've always wondered that.
Well, the mechanical ability was taught by the class of hard knocks. For me, I didn't ever go to a technical school, wanted to, but didn't really have the time. There was a lot of things that I didn't get to do because we had too many chores. So if I caught a little time to work in the shop, I'd tear something apart and see if I could get it put back together. And I kind of developed a passion for the mechanical part of that. My dad he could fix things, but he really wasn't a mechanic. And when it came to engine work, that was just above his know-how. And my grandpa was pretty much the same way. They would hire that stuff done, and I wanted to learn how an engine worked, and so I started that pretty young. I wasn't in a lot of sports in school. I wanted to be, but there again, we had too many hogs to feed, and that interfered with practice, and that was part of life then. And the 80s, like you said, Brad, they were pretty tough. When you mentioned in that article, it said something about at the end without going broke. That was in my mind, I guess. If you're going to farm, that was one of the big things that you had to do was try not to go broke. And in the 80s, that was kind of a tough feat.
There was a lot of courthouse sales going on in the 80s, and it was a hard time. I recall that. And the other thing that I think is cool about this article and about your tracking with that is we talk a lot about this is kids don't always find their niche. They don't always find how they fit in. And sports is always a way for some people to do that. But then other kids find different avenues. We've talked about band. We've talked about music. We've talked about FFA being the channel for kids to connect to their school and really get to do something. But you were saying things that we say now as old people. Wish these kids would get off their phones. I wish this. And in this article, you talked about other kids playing videos and stuff, and you didn't really have time for that. You were out disking.
Yeah. I remember my brother not thinking that was a very good statement because he liked to play video games at the time, and I didn't mind it, but I'd rather be out working. We were just cut from different cloth, I guess, that way.
It's impressive, and it doesn't surprise me at all that you kind of took to that and stuck with it when times were hard. Now, just one more kind of fun thing, and we'll get into the serious stuff, but in the first part, we always do a little fun stuff. In the 1970s, I went through a bunch of newspaper articles, and you weren't getting interviewed, but every time you ate a meal outside of your house, it was in the Zion News in the Republican Times paper. You and your brother, I pretty much, a lot of your meals were chronicled in the paper.
I was mortified, but I loved my grandma to death. I really did, but she wrote the Zion what was that called? The Zion Articles or
Yes.
something like that. And I, I loved her to death. I really do. And I miss her terribly. But that was one of the things I always wanted to say, Grandma, I wish you wouldn't do that, because people in town know what we did last weekend, what we had for supper.
There are no secrets.
Yeah. When we went to church and who preached and so on and so forth. It was, but that was part of, I guess, in the old days, keeping the community informed, and she felt that was pretty important, and she wanted to pass that on. I kind of remember asking my mom to do that a little bit after she got to where she couldn't.
What were those early tractor pull events and competitions like? Those local things, and when the first time you did that, was it a kind of a community event, something that was attached to something else, or was it like everybody's going there for the tractor pull?
For me, I remember probably I was about 10 or so. My grandparents took Dustin and I, Randall and Marie Cox took Dustin and I to a Thrashers reunion out in McLouth, Kansas. And that was a big event out there, and they had big thrashing machines all set up, and they were thrashing oats and baling hay and all kinds of things that they did around the turn of the century that you didn't see. We'd never seen anything like that coming from Hickory. Nevertheless, and that was all interesting, I guess, but they were down over the hill. I could hear these old John Deeres pop, 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 and they'd get to really where they was kind of popping slow, and they was pulling hard, and I could hear that. And I asked my grandpa, I said, I want to go down there at that tractor pull and watch it. And he says, I don't care about that, but he said, if you want to go down there, just go ahead. And he says, whenever I get ready to go or whatever, I'll come down there and find you. And so there's a huge crowd of people, but back then he just sent this little kid, and I just went off down there and found somebody to sit by. And I watched this tractor pull, and I watched these old tractors go down through there, and these guys are really working them. They're trying to get them to go further down the track, and they're really working it. And I just kind of got a little bit of inspiration, I guess, from that. I liked the competition part of it, and I liked the engine part of it. I knew that there were guys that were working on them to make them souped up, make them better than they were from the factory. That part kind of intrigued me. That just kind of put a passion in for. I didn't get to do it for several years after that, but it just kind of put that in my mind. My grandpa came and found me 3 hours later, and I didn't care about the rest of the thrashing show. I just pretty much just stayed and watched that old
locked
tractor.
in on that.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it seems like there are elements that I hear about that people like it. It's noisy. It's big equipment. I mean, it's power. It's just that sense of power, and the people that do it can feel it as well. And I can see how you could get attached to it.
Yeah, if you're raised on a farm, it can be kind of boring to just use a tractor day after day, sit on those rows in the river bottom and just go back and forth. And it's something to kind of spice that up a little bit, to where you can take what you do every day and make it a little more interesting. You can even hone your skills a little bit working in the field, as far as using the brakes and so on and so forth, to kind of learn your tractor a little bit and feel what it feels like, feel like the dirt underneath you.
When you won recently and they interviewed you at the end, you talked about your very first competition. Tell me about that, because apparently you drove to it on your tractor.
That was in 1983, I'm pretty sure. My best friend in school all the way through was Jeff Westcott. We were buddies, and we both lived on farms, and Jeff lived up by Tyndall at that time, and he invited me to come up and spend the weekend with him, and there was going to be a tractor pull at Tyndall, Missouri. So I spent quite a little bit of time. My dad had a 3020 John Deere. He bought it in 1969. I waxed it up. I've changed the fuel filters. I did about everything. I turned the drawbar over. I did as much stuff as I thought I could to make it competitive. And then I drove it up to Jeff's house, spent the night on Friday night. Saturday morning, we got up really early. I don't think either one of us slept. He had a 4020, and I had a 3020, and we drove those things. I can still remember to this day driving down the road heading to the tractor pull, praying, and there were some clouds in the sky, and I was praying it didn't rain it out. I wanted to pull so bad, and it was going to be my first pull. So that actually happened in 1983 in Tyndall, Missouri.
And how'd you do?
I think I got dead last.
Hey.
I asked the wrong guy for advice on what gear to put it in. Had no idea. I'd never been to a tractor pull before. I'd seen the sleds and how they work, that you hook onto and you pull, and how they get heavier as you pull the further. But I'd never hooked on anything quite like that, and I was in too big a gear, and I killed the thing at about 180, 200 feet, somewhere in there, and I was mortified. I just so disappointed, but I thought, I'm going to figure this out one way or another.
Brad, what was your dad's involvement with this? Talk about that.
Yeah, I think the first memories that I have of a tractor pulling are one of two things. We went to the little local pools, like the one in Tyndall. I think they had one in Chula and one in Laredo. And, it was mostly like small antique tractors and stuff. And a lot of the, local farmers were, definitely interested in that. But the thing that really got my attention with it, and I think the thing that my dad was maybe even more interested in, once a year we would go to Bethany, and there was a big tractor pull there. And I'm not sure what classes those were, but they were more powerful than the antiques. They were blowing smoke, and they were all waxed up and shiny, and really fancy names and things, painted on the side of them. And I think that was something that, like Adrian said, was really, really different than everything else that you'd been around. And that was a big deal to drive all the way to Bethany and watch a tractor pull back then. And Dad took time off the farm to do that. So those are some of my early memories. That Dad, his first kind of pulling tractor that he got involved with was an old tractor that I think maybe Adrian could help me with this, but maybe it was my grandpa's tractor or one of my dad's first tractors. And the whole time that I was growing up, it was just sitting out in the field, and it was all rusted down and, just looked like a big pile of junk, really. And at some point, probably maybe early 90s, Dad decided that he was going to take that tractor and restore it and make a pulling tractor out of it. And he did that. And that was kind of his entry point, was a B John Deere.
Yeah, your grandpa bought that tractor new, I think. That'd been Alan's dad, Ernie. And if memory serves me correctly, it was a 1952 B John Deere.
Cool. I want you to kind of set this up. Talk about the basic configuration of a tractor pull. How long is the track? What kind of categories we're talking about? And then how the sled is constructed. You mentioned that it gets heavier as you pull. And if you could kind of describe that aspect to our listeners.
So you'll hear me refer to the sled or the boat. We call it either one. And we're very blessed up in this part of the country to have some very professional sleds that come out of Jeff City. They do a weight transfer sled. So how they work is they're self-propelled. They pull themselves back once you're done with the pull. So back in the old days, we used to have a pullback tractor that pulled the old sleds back. But now these are self-propelled. When you hook onto the sled, today, the sled that I hooked on, it weighs about 60,000 pounds. So the sled that I pulled at Louisville weighed somewhere around 60,000, thereabouts. It starts out pretty light because the box, the weight transfer device, starts out at the back. So by leverage, that weight is behind the back the axles, the drive axles, and that doesn't give you much drawbar. In other words, it doesn't pull down on the back of the tractor very much where you're hooked to it. As you take off, that box transfers up the sled, up an incline and forward. And the more forward the motion of that box moves, the more weight it pushes on the pan. The pan's the big flat piece that drags on the ground. That's the part that's chains hooked to that we hook onto with our drawbar. And the further that box goes forward, the harder it pulls.
So talk about one of the things that I notice is in the video, the back tires compress massively. I mean, they look like you're running on flat tires sometimes, and the front pops up in the air, at least in a lot of situations. I've seen it actually dive into the ground and break off
right.
Some of those things too. Talk about the tires and the aspect of how that weight, what it feels like as that thing is getting heavier and heavier, and what you're feeling in the seat.
Well, the feel of the tractor and what's going on underneath you, it takes a lot of time to get that to get that feel. And when you take off, the tractor that I drive now, it has about 2,750 horsepower. So when you unleash it and you let it have all the clutch and you give it all the throttle, pretty much, you're pretty much taking 2,700 horsepower and putting it on the ground. And the tires will actually probably compress several inches, as you can see in the video. We run about 3.5 pounds of air pressure in a 24.5 tire, which is a 24.5 inch wide base tire. and they'll go down probably 4, 5, 6 inches. But the object of that is to get bigger footprint on the ground. So instead of having a round surface then that flattens the tire out and gives you more of a flat surface. That in turn shortens the life of that tire greatly.
I would think so.
The harder you pull on that tire flat, the harder it is on the cords, and you are eventually breaking the cords. And I noticed I was kind of studying one of the videos of the pull at Louisville, and the wrinkle in the sidewall of my tire actually goes all the way up to the bead. So it's actually even wrinkle in the bead, and the bead is screwed with about 40 screws in each bead to the wheel, or it would just spin or pop off there. So we're not really using much air pressure. We're trying to get the tire to go flat so that we get surface area on the ground for the maximum traction.
Are there divisions in this? And are those divisions based on the weight you're pulling or based on the size of the tractor or size of the engine or both?
Both. There are lots of divisions for weight, the size of the engine, and the configuration of the turbos. So I pull a diesel engine that is 640 cubic inches. It's called the 4.1 or limited pro stock class. We are 640 cubic inch engine, 16 millimeter fuel pump, 4.1 turbo, 4.1 inch turbo, and that would be the division basically that I run. What I started out in was like the 8500 limited pro stock, and that's what Alan pulled with me for years into Brad's dad, and they are 466 cubic inches with 13 millimeter pumps, 3x4 turbos, or they're limited to no RPM limits. You can run them as tight as you feel like you're able to do, and then they are maximum at 8,500 pounds, and mine's 9,500.
So everybody in this division is going to pull the same boat.
That's right.
At the same weight.
That's right.
Okay.
You're going to when you're scaled in. For instance, at Louisville, at the National Farm Machinery Show, they scale you before they take you over to Freedom Hall. And outdoors, when we pull all summer, it's the same way. You scale before you go line up to hook on the sled.
I remember, Adrian, the first time that I came to watch you guys, when you switched over to what I'm going to call the smoke blowers. I was used to watching you guys pull antiques, and, there was like a speed limit on those. And I kind of was walking across the end of the track, and one of you guys were coming down the track, and I don't know how fast you guys go now, but it looks like it's like halfway speed and halfway power. How much of it's speed and how much of it's power and how much of it is like skill in driving the tractor? Is it like the guy that we saw trying to, if like somebody like Chris or Jeff or me got on it, would it be like somebody that's never been on a bobsled in the Olympics, or what would that experience be like?
I could put all three of you guys on my tractor, and you can make a successful pass. It is set up to where it's now you might need a diaper or something like that when you turn it loose, but it is a lot of fun. It happens fast, but the pass at Louisville, I think I went 245 feet in about 6 seconds, pulling 60,000 pounds. So it's happening pretty fast. We'll get up to 35 mile an hour on the track in the summer outdoors. It's not that fast on the short tracks in the wintertime, but the skill that you're talking about, that comes with just years and years of pulling. I've always said the good pullers, the best seasoned, the well thought through pullers that are the toughest, started out with antiques. You can learn things running 3.5, 4 mile an hour going down the track to maximize your tractor and your pull and your traction and all that you can't think of when you're running 35 mile an hour. And whenever you don't have horsepower to waste, you've got, say, 100 horse, and that's all you've got. You've got to use it, and that makes the best pullers. So I always felt like that the pullers that started out with the humble beginnings of antiques and the slow tractors are always made really good pullers whenever they get up to the big stuff.
For our audience and people that maybe aren't familiar with this, so it's the distance that you travel during the pull that determines it. That's the whole thing.
That's right. It's the distance. Speed has nothing to do with it. Actually, it has everything to do with it. The guy that goes the fastest and has the power to pull it is probably going to win. However, you've got to go the furthest, and all the pulls now are read by laser down to the 100th of an inch. If you saw the distances at Louisville finals, I won that thing by less than an inch, or a little over an inch, I think it was. But it was really tight. So they're read with lasers down to just a really fine point.
I think that's fascinating to me. And it also seems like you're running out of road in some of the settings. I mean, you're in an indoor arena. It's not like you can just keep going up into the GA section.
No, but you want to. I've been going there for this was my 6th trip, and I've always wanted to hit the sand. Something's always happened when we got there, and outdoors were pretty tough. We've been able to win outdoors a lot, been very successful and fortunate. But when I'd get to Louisville, it would, part of it would be nerves, full disclosure. You get down there inside that building, you just look around, and it's like being at the Super Bowl. There's just people everywhere, and it's a different environment where outside, you're just kind of out and calm, and we're used to that environment. Whereas Louisville and Freedom Hall, it's almost hallowed ground to a tractor puller because all the greats have been there. And we're down there on that type of dirt where those folks have pulled for years and years and years. This was their 60th farm show's 60th anniversary, so they've had 60 tractor pulls. There's been a lot of champions over a lot of years, and a lot of them repeat champions. And so when you're down there and you see that sand pile at the end, when you're hooking on, that's what you focus on. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I'm ever going to hit that. And when I hooked on this year, I felt like I had a really good, probably I felt as confident as I ever have. And I got to put the front wheels in the sand, and I was very, very grateful about that.
I don't think people realize how hard it is just to get there, Adrian. Could you explain how hard it is just to get there?
So the National Farm Machinery Show it's compiled of, for the class that I'm in, the limited pro stock class, they'll take 2 classes of 12. They'll pull 12 tractors on Thursday night in one class. They'll pull 12 tractors on Friday night in one class. So they're going to take 24 tractors from the United States. And in order to get there, it's an invitation. So you send in an application, and for them to take you, you need to have won a national title. Points title, and for me, I've won I believe 7 in a row in the Pro Pulling League points titles. In order to do that, you've got to do a lot of driving in the summertime. We made 24 hooks last summer, I believe. Drove about 14,500 miles.
So this is you loading up all of your equipment, your tractor, and going to different cities across the Midwest.
Yeah, you might be in Evansville, Indiana one weekend, and you might be up somewhere in Nebraska the next weekend. Or we have been known to leave Evansville, Indiana one night and had to be up in northern Iowa the next night. And there's a lot of real estate between those two places, so you drive all night to get there. And you can't have a breakdown that's significant between the hooks or you don't make it. And if you do have a significant breakdown, you get to do a lot of work overnight and whatever. But
so say that again. 7 times you've won the national points title.
That's
that
right.
League.
That's right. I've only been to Louisville 6 times because during COVID one year they didn't have the farm show. If it wasn't for that, I'd have been able to be at Louisville farm show 7 years in a row.
And how many competitors do you see at an average, a good size event?
Outdoors in the summertime, there's probably the most in my class would be 25 in a class, and probably the average would be 15. There's some shows that are a little smaller, the further to drive ones or something. But you go to a big show, say like the Missouri State Fair, there'll be 25 in that class. They're down at Sedalia, Evansville, Indiana. There was about 25. There's just a lot. There's some of the bigger pulls, we had one at Macon this year, and I think there was about 20 in it. Average of 20 tractors in each class.
So I imagine that there's, like sports, we talk about rivalries all the time. You probably see the same 5 or 10 people pull into these competitions. Like, there's Billy Ray again and his tractor. I'm going to be facing him, right? I mean, it becomes a small fraternity where you see the same people a lot.
Yeah, we're, the dynamics of sports, and there's a lot of things that go into that. There are good rivalries, and there are some that are a little bit rough. And if you've won 7 championships, you might not get the hero's welcome when you pull in every time. And I take that as a compliment a little bit. It is nice to have some camaraderie and be able to go around. And for the most part, we pull with a bunch of really good people. They're hardworking farmers, most of them, and it's a good group, and it's a lot of fun. But when you've got a competition, it's down. I pulled one of my best friends is Alan Tolson, and I always told him, and we pulled against one another for years because our tractors were the same class. And I had the Hickory hooker, and he had the Chiefs hooker, and we were pretty tough, and we were best buddies. But I'm telling you, when we hooked on the sled, that was all over till we got to the end of the track.
Which is what a good rivalry is all about.
Absolutely, yep. And I was always happy for him if he beat me. Sometimes it was a little tough to be happy. I always shook his hand, but he told me one time, he said, "That's why I bring my truck. So if you're mad, I've just got to ride home."
Oh, I love that. So talk about the safety aspects of the sport. Now, when I watch it as a newbie to it, have you ever felt in danger? I mean, is there danger, or have a lot of these things been refined to the point where you feel pretty comfortable with the situation?
I'm probably, there's a 100-foot flagman out there on the track, and there's a 300-foot flagman. They're the closest to the machine, and they're probably in the most harm's way, I would imagine, of anybody. I'm in one of the safer spots. They mandate, as you can imagine, fire equipment, helmets, neck braces, and all that equipment gets checked very often through tech inspections. Like the flywheels, all that stuff has to be SFI approved, and a lot of things like that. I actually got knocked out cold on the track in Gordyville, Illinois years ago, and I didn't get my straps tight enough, and I had a really rough ride, and I bounced to the top of the cage, and it knocked me out. Broke my helmet. So it can get pretty violent. Things happen really fast when you unleash that much horsepower tied to something that pulls that hard. But as far as the safety for the spectators and the fans and the track officials and the drivers all together, it's monitored real closely. And if there is an incident, you can about always bet there'll be a mandate that rectifies that real soon, and then we all have to do it. And sometimes they're not very much fun to put on your machine, whether it's now we have to have crosses in front of the turbochargers. So like the turbocharger on the tractors that I'm working on now, the turbocharger turns about 130,000 RPM. So it's really spinning fast. And when that all comes unleashed, it's really wanting out of there, and it's dangerous when it comes out of there. So we're mandated to have crosses in front of the turbos and then behind them and so on and so forth to maximize the safety for the spectators and the track officials. And then we're belted in. Fire suits are mandated, and they're not just cheap ones. They have to be pretty good, because if you're strapped in that thing, it takes a little while to get out of it if it catches on fire. Just general safety things, but they watch that really close. The national organizations do.
There's those failure videos. I mean, kids like to watch the crashes, or they will like to watch something blow up in the middle of stuff, and I've seen some of those. And Chris, I mean, if we want to go viral, we'd blow up our podcast studio.
Well, it's your studio. It wouldn't hurt me as much as it would hurt you.
But literally 1 million views. I mean, and where I'm leading with this is there's just a lot of interest in this. There's a lot of fans on site at these events, but there's a lot of people that really eat up all the things around it. Just like my daughter's a big F1 racing fan. This year she had to get Apple TV to watch F1, but like those things come on at midnight. There are people in bars watching that stuff. They eat up all the video. Your personality kind of comes out. Is that part of the deal? As you get better and better, do people want to talk to you more and learn more about you and figure out if you're somebody they want to become a big fan of?
Well, I guess so. I would agree with that statement, I guess, Jeff. I had a guy that bought a tractor a couple years ago, and he was at Louisville, and before I'd pulled, we were just visiting, and he said, I don't know if you realize or not how much I watch you. And I just, he's been pulling for quite a while. He started out in the antiques, and he's moved up through the ranks, and he bought a tractor that's in my class, and he's doing a really good job with it. And I just told him, I said, boy, you want to be careful about watching me, because I screw up pretty often. He says, I haven't ever seen you screw up. And so I guess I am probably my worst critic, I suppose, or toughest critic. However, sometimes I tend to overthink it. When you make those decisions on the cuff, and you don't have a lot of time, and you've got to try to decide, all right, what gear am I going to put this thing in? This track's pulling hard, and we have to make some split-minute decisions. You don't have a lot of time, and I don't always hit it just right. And he told me, he said, I very seldom finish in front of you. And I said, well, you're getting better all the time. So I gave him a few pointers, and it acted like he really appreciated it. And then probably some of the greatest times, I guess, at the tractor pulls is when it's all said and done, and you see a young family bring their kids back there to the tractors in the pits, and little Billy wants to get up on the tractor, and it's such a fancy looking thing that he probably, his folks are mortified. They don't even want him on it or touching it or putting fingerprints on it or anything, and I'll just grab them if I can and put them up on there and let their folks get a picture with them on the tractor, and those are big moments. And my buddy Josh, he and I have been pulling together for a long time, told me it was this summer, we were in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, pulling, and we were standing there looking at the crowd, and there's just a lot of people. And we were frustrated because we'd had to drive all the way to Cape Girardeau to a tractor pull, and it's getting almost harvest time, and we need to be home working on our combines and feeling a little bit sorry for ourselves. And he looked up and he said something that I'll probably never forget. And he says, Adrian, did you ever think that those folks that had paid to come out here and watch this is a dream to them that they just can't imagine achieving, and we take it for granted. And that really hit with me, so I try really hard to spend a little more time with the fans. Sometimes when you're busy, they'll ask you a question. You don't want to take the time to talk to them, but I'm trying to get better about that.
How many folks at Freedom Hall? I mean, what's the capacity there with the tractor pull?
I wish I could tell you that, Jeff. I really don't know. It's a big place.
At least 12,000 or more, I would think.
I just don't know. I know they play a lot of basketball games in there, and it's kind of weird that I think it was 2 years ago we had a tractor pull there, and I think we left there late on a Saturday night, and there was ball game scheduled for like Sunday night. They were going to have to get the dirt all dug out and put the floor back down and get it ready. But it's something to be in front of that many people, and I could hear them roar. I'd never heard that before. They were usually gasping because I'd done such a terrible job down there, and whenever I set the front axle in the sand pile, I could hear them roar. And that was one of the highlights in my career, probably.
Well, and they know what that meant. I mean, it's that they're knowledgeable fans. Is what I'm getting at. It's not just he got to the end. It's like they probably go, I haven't seen anybody get to that spot before. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was awesome.
So, are there prelims in this? You said do you pull once early on and then pull again, or is it just one pull and then they take all the measurements?
In the summertime, when we're pulling at the county fairs and so on and so forth, we're one and done. But at Louisville, so we'll pull, as I said earlier, we'll pull 12 tractors. We'll pull Thursday night. They take the top 3 from Thursday night. Then 12 tractors will pull Friday night, and they take the top 3 from those, bring the 6 back to the finals on Saturday night. And so Saturday night it's the top tractors from all the classes that pulled all week, and then Saturday night's finals for everybody.
And do you get to roll over your pull from Thursday night, or does it start fresh?
From scratch. You start from scratch.
One of the things that we were just talking, and you mentioned the media. So you win, and people want to talk to you, and people want you to talk and open up about all sorts of stuff. How did you deal with that level of intrusion, celebrity, whatever you want to take on that?
Well, I'm not that great a public speaker, and so I try really hard to avoid those situations, but I've been successful enough that they tend to kind of want to visit with you once in a while. And my buddy, he was really teasing me one day because I'd figured out 5 years ago or so, I tried a clutch technique. So I'm liable to get off on the subject here. When you're when you're starting off with the sled, we call that coming out of the hole. And you're winding this engine up, and your foot's down, and you're holding on this clutch, and this clutch is pushing against you really hard. Engine's coming up on power, and that's probably the most fun part of the whole process is just holding it off and getting. I let out on the clutch, and there's a technique in that to keep the tires hooked up and so on and so forth. And I figured out that 5 or 6 years ago that I could let all the way out on the clutch, or almost all the way out on the clutch. And if the tractor wasn't happy, I could push down just a little bit. and then ease back out again. And at that time, pin the throttle, and it would just sit down and take off and shoot out like a rocket. And the first time I tried that, I won by like 30 feet. And I thought, holy cow, I have got this figured out. And I was so happy. So the second pull, we tried it, and I didn't win by 30 feet, but I won again, the next weekend. And so I'm so pumped up about this new clutch technique. And so the lady that goes around and does all the interviews for Pro Pulling League interviewed me that night, and she says, now, I've been hearing rumbles that you've got a new clutch technique. What is it? And I just spilled my guts right there in front of everybody. And my buddy walks up to me and he says, you realize you just gave all your competitors an edge here? And I said, they'll never figure it out. And it wasn't 2 weeks after that. One of the guys that I pulled with for a long time, he whipped me really good from up in Minnesota, and he came up to me and patted me on the back. The old boy weighs about 400 pounds. When he pats you on the back, it almost knocks the wind out of you. And his name's Mike, and he says, "Thank you for that clutch tip." He says, "Man, that worked really good."
Well, and you were telling us you go to some great lengths to get away from those interviews when you're not quite in the frame of mind. And you were telling us the story earlier. You want to share that one, or
yeah, I was.
I won't make you, but
well, no, it's fine. It's all fair game, I suppose. But the interviewers at the tractor pulls will kind of follow you around, and they'll tell you a lot of times, I'll be back in a little bit to interview you if you're all right with it, and usually I am. And this one gal, she was kind of chasing me around, and I really wasn't in the mood to talk to her that particular night. I was wanting to focus on my tractor and what we were doing that night. So I'd kind of avoided her and hid around behind some haulers and stuff, and she kind of got me cornered, and so I just stepped in a porta potty, and so she wouldn't find me. But it was about 100 degrees outside, and the aroma wasn't very good in there either. And I waited about as long as I could stand it, and I thought, she's surely not still out there, but if she is, I'm just going to have to get interviewed because I can't take it in here anymore. And I opened the door, and there she stood with her microphone. So I went ahead and gave her an interview.
She has you for the rest of your career because she's got that one over on you there.
She told me at Louisville, she interviewed me at Louisville, and we have a good relationship. She's a good person, and we were talking about the little Jesus that I have found in my pocket, and she brought that up, and I appreciated it. She picks those little knickknacks out and tries to make it interesting for the crowd, and that's really what it's all about.
Talk about terminology, okay? The Pro Pulling League put out driver and action terms, okay? If I say these things, some of them might be self-evident, and some of them might be a little different. So drop the hammer is one.
That's pin the throttle. In other words, you got her wide open.
Hooking up.
That's when the tires latch to the ground and stop spinning.
Porpoising.
Haven't got a clue.
That's on those videos when the front end starts to bounce.
We've got another term for that, but I can't really share with you.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well,
after we're off the air, I'll tell you what.
Okay, very good, very good. Walking it out.
When you walk it out, when the sled's leaving the hole, or when you're taking off with the sled, when you walk it out, you're spending extra time on the clutch, which is the weak link between the engine and the wheels, and you're using that clutch to keep the tires hooked up. And you walk it out. When we walk it out of the hole, that's getting the sled started, and you spend extra time on the clutch.
Brad, what about this, strikes you as you're kind of listening to this, and you've been an observer of it and lived it a little bit?
I think I just sit here and enjoy all the stories. I couldn't help but think I wanted to, kind of take it back to where I started at when Dad used to take me to the tractor pulls at Bethany. And I think when he started tractor pulling with that old B, I don't think that it ever entered his mind that he would end up, pulling to the level that you guys ended up pulling at. And I just wanted to say thank you, for kind of taking him along on the ride. I think that, you guys put a lot of miles in together, and I think that you helped him achieve a dream that probably wouldn't have happened, if it hadn't been for you. So I really appreciate that, Adrian. I asked Dad for some funny stories about you, and he was pretty good about, kind of protecting the fraternity there a little bit. But Mom wasn't so big on it. She had a couple thoughts. She shared a couple travel stories with hotels and some special hotel arrangements that you guys were able to get. And I think that maybe you guys had, I learned this term from Adrian, maybe some maybe you and my mom had some intense moments of fellowship around Thanksgiving one year about going to a tractor pull. I don't know if you got those stories.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember those. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I was blessed. If you don't think that the Lord puts good people in your path, you're mistaken. I lost my dad in 1995, and obviously that was kind of a rough time for me. And it probably was about 6 months, one day after 6 months after Dad passed, I got a phone call from Alan, and I'd never met Alan before. He needed some help with a pulling tractor, and he's been pitch hitting Dad ever since. And that's something that you just don't get those every day, not those kind of relationships. We've been through a whole lot, good and bad, and he was good, very good to me when I went through a couple rough times in my life, and there's just a camaraderie there that, and a friendship that you just can't replace it. There's no way. One of the funniest stories, I've got several. Alan bought a new Peterbilt, and we were so excited to take it on a trip. So we go out in Illinois, and I always did all the driving, and he didn't ever complain. He rode along. I did all the driving, and we crossed the river over there on 36 at Hannibal, and we got in the darndest rainstorm you ever saw. Alan won't say much. He's just really quiet, but we're driving along, and I didn't want to act really dumb or anything, but brand new Peterbilt truck, and it's pouring down rain, and I can't find the windshield wiper switch. And I just kept looking, and I didn't want to appear so ignorant that I couldn't find it, but I couldn't. So we drive about 10 miles in this rainstorm, and he looks over at me and so eloquently says, "It's all right with me if you turn the windshield wipers on." And I pulled over and put the old truck in neutral and set the air. And I said, "Well, you're going to have to help me find a switch because I've been looking for it for 10 miles and haven't been." Well, I don't know where it's at either. So we had to spend quite a little bit of time. He said, "I think I'm going to have to get the book out." We finally found it. And that was one of the stories. And the other one that your mom referred to on the motel, I told this at his 50th birthday party, I think, maybe, or something. But we were going to the dyno years ago in Indiana, taking an engine to the dyno to have it tested before I had my own dyno. We were south of Indianapolis, and we were in this little town, and it only had one motel. And I said, I called Alan, the chief. Everybody does. I said, "Chief, shouldn't we stop by and get a room?" He said, "There's nobody there." He says, "It's not very busy. We'll be all right." So we go on, unload the engine. We work on it for a little bit, go back to the motel, and it is full of railroad trucks. You can't even find a place to park. And I'm thinking, oh, my goodness. So we go inside the motel, and the lady says, "I got one room left." I said, "Well, what is it?" And she said, "It's the smoking honeymoon suite." And I said, "Oh, I don't know." And Alan says, "We'll take it." So we got in there and put our bags down, and he walked around kind of giving everything the look, and the bed's heart-shaped and everything. And, of course, there's just one. Honeymooners don't need two beds. So, and he walks up and looks at the shower, and it doesn't have a curtain or nothing. He turns around, looks at me, and he says that shower doesn't even have a curtain. I said, "Alan," I said, "my goodness, honeymooners don't need a shower curtain." And he says, "Whoa." I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, you take a shower and I'll go look for the ice machine." And I said, "Whenever you get done, then you can go look for ice. I'll take a shower." And I slept on the couch and he got the bed. That's the story. And it smelled bad like smoke. But from then on, we always stopped ahead and checked in, make sure we could get a room.
That is a great story.
I love it.
Put that one in the archives.
Oh, goodness. Let's capture as we get kind of steered toward the end here. You won the National Farm Machinery Show Championship tractor pull in what division?
The 9,500 limited pro stock class.
And that's like the big.
No, the pro stock class is as big as it gets, and that's an insane level of horsepower. They make about 5,000, 5,500 horsepower. The money is just it's a really, really big high dollar sport. That's I stay in the limited pro stock class.
But at the same event. They're there when you're there.
That's right. Yes.
And And this is, I'm not asking you about your prize money, but there was $330,000 prize money. This is not a small thing in any fashion. There's a lot of people there watching. There's a lot of money. I assume there's a lot of sponsors. And
this year, Farm Credit of Mid-America sponsored it, and Syngenta's done it in the past. It's usually some pretty big names that sponsor the pull there at the farm show. You ask about the check. I've had several people ask me around town, have you got your check yet? And wonder what it's going to be. And I said, I don't know. All I know is they said it's in the mail.
You can get a nice hotel room, maybe with that.
Maybe a non-smoking.
Right.
Now we see in NASCAR, we see all these things and people are just labeled up in their uniforms. Has any of that creeped into the tractor world?
Oh, absolutely. It's crazy. Louisville, a couple years ago, there was a guy there that actually sold custom driver suits. And I'd always gotten mine from like Speedway or Summit, just a cheapie. And I told Tyann, I said, I think I'd like to have a driver suit. And so I walked up and started talking to the old boy, and it's like $1,500. And I had to really think about that. Now, I'm not going to tell you what I've invested in that tractor, but it's way, way, way north of that. And she looks at me like, what in the world is wrong with you? Why don't you just go ahead? So we made the order. The most uncomfortable things I've ever had happen next to the honeymoon suite was an old boy measuring your inseam, and there's people there taking pictures at the National Farm Machinery Show. However, they put your logo, the name of my tractor is the Hickory Hooker, and that's on my driver suit. And then, of course, we have crew shirts that kind of have a picture of the tractor on the front of it. They're kind of professionally designed, and about everybody does. I mean, it's kind of a higher level there.
Okay, I got to ask, how many's on your crew? Or on a typical crew?
It just depends. Sometimes it might just be Tyann and I. There'll always be somebody that helps, but she doesn't go very often. Usually Josh, good friend of mine I've been pulling with for years, goes with me, and he has his own tractor, so we pull together. And then there's a couple young folks from up around Princeton that go and help us some, but I've got a couple grandsons coming up. One's 11 and one's 8. And I took them to the Missouri State Fair, and they got to make their maiden voyage on the old John Deeres last year. So they're professionals, and they're going to go with me some this year and kind of learn the ropes on how you get the tractor ready. And one of the most joyous things that I think that I can do now, after that I've got the Louisville thing in the books, is pass on what I've learned to the younger generations. And I seem to... I kind of wondered, actually, when I was getting interviewed at Louisville there at Freedom Hall, I thought, gosh, what happens when you get to the bottom of your bucket list? You at the bottom of your bucket. This was something number one, I didn't think I'd probably ever get done. Now that I've done it, what am I going to do? And I feel like one of the most important things that I can do is take what I've learned and pass it on to the younger generation. There, as you can imagine, there aren't a lot of those 14-year-old kids restoring old machinery now. It's farming has changed. The dynamics of it's changed. The machinery's changed. It's got computers aboard and all that. And I find a lot of satisfaction from taking young kids and teaching them the way that I learned.
I think that's great. Brad, you've talked about the change in farming and how it's hard to connect your kids to it, but there were still parts of it that fed into their sports, fed into their life, even though they've gone on and done other professional pursuits.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's really changed. Not very many kids doing that kind of stuff anymore. I was thinking about, as you were talking there about, and we haven't really got into the part of your career where you build tractors for others. I mean, that's turned into a whole life of its own, and I know that you've been extremely successful in that lane as well. When I was thinking about, when my dad quit tractor pulling after a year or two, I asked him, what do you miss about it the most? And it parallels other sports that we've talked about. He said that the thrill of being in the game, like that rush that you get when you're going down the track. And then he said the people. And I know that for you, it's not just the people that you've got to play with or like pull with, but it's also the people that you've got to coach and that you've got to work with and build their tractors. And I wondered, what your thoughts were around all of that.
Well, you wonder, I think everybody wonders, how am I going to, I know that I can't pull at this level forever. I've moved up about as high as I can go. I know that there's got to be a time when I actually throttle back. Pardon the pun, but
classic pun. I love them.
Nevertheless, I think one of the ways that I can do that, and that all kind of came about just here the last summers, whenever I got a couple grandsons out there, and we spent all day getting the old tractors out and teaching them how the clutch works and how you back up to the sled and the techniques of using the brake. If one wheel goes to spinning a little bit, you can hold it back with the brake, or you can steer the tractor with the brake because the front end's not on the ground. That's how you drive them. And being able to just pass that on is one way that is going to add some grace to me to be able to phase out a little bit and to be able to throttle back. Because if you know me very well, you know that when I do something, I try to really do it 100%. And I used to grow corn competitively.
Just real quick, Jeff. I got to have the fun of watching Adrian go down that path. When he goes down a competitive path, he goes all the way. And so I had the pleasure of working with Adrian as he started down the path of trying to win a national corn grower contest for the state of Missouri. And I think he did that a couple times. And I got to be a little part of that. And all the people in my world, in the DeKalb seed world, when Adrian won this big pull, there was quite a bit of media around it. And I got a lot of messages like, did you see that Adrian won this tractor pull? And I said, yeah, he's kind of a big deal,
I think that's wonderful. And guys, I mean, there's more to talk about. I'll give you an opening for any last stories or any last thoughts before we close out today. But you've talked about the legacy, and that feeds right into what we talk about here, which is that we're kind of doing the things that we do, but we're leaving footprints and we're leaving a path for other people. And we're also maybe uplifting people while we're doing it. And all of it's good. And so the wins happen in a lot of different arenas. They happen on the track, they happen in our families, they happen in our work and farming, just in the life that we're living when we pursue those dreams and have success. So
I sat down and talked to a young man that's wanting to get started in the sport just the other day, and I expressed to him, and he's wanting to go right to the top. He's not wanting to mess around with the small stuff. And I explained to him that the fundamentals of starting at the bottom, but also the humility that comes with starting from the bottom and moving your way up. I've seen people buy in at the top, and there's just a different mentality there than the people that started out from the bottom and worked their way up through. And like we were talking earlier, you guys have all coached, and I find myself, I never considered myself as a coach, but there's a coach. I guess it'd be a terminology for what I'm doing to some of those folks, and I've never really considered it that. But it's my gift to them because the sport's been really good to me.
That's outstanding. And there is a feeling when you help somebody up the ladder and you enjoy their success as much as your own, that you just can't beat that.
I've got one last question. I've been taking notes over here. Do you ever see yourself going back, or do you go back and pull with the old antiques where you started? Like you just climb on and say, I know I've reached the mountaintop on these. I'm just going to go back and get on one of these antiques and do it.
I actually did, Chris. I can't tell you what year it was, but I actually sold my one of the tractors, and before the new one was done, there wasn't much going on, and I got the old G out and went back to the Missouri State Fair, and I won on the thing. But I remember snapping the clutch in and opening up the throttle, and I had the sudden urge to cross my leg, like to sit back and cross your leg like you do in a chair, because it felt like I had plenty of time to take a nap, maybe drink a glass of tea, and carry on a conversation with somebody, write a book. I don't know, before I get to the other end. It was just happening so slow, because by the time the tractor that I pull now, by the time you think about it, it's already over. It's already happened. So yes, I did. I enjoyed it, but I don't plan on going back that far again. But it sure is fun to watch the younger generation start that way.
Yeah.
Guys, thanks for giving us a peek into the world of tractor pulling at the highest competitive level. This show is about people that come from small places and do big things. Man, I can't think of anything much bigger than what we've been talking about here. The weight, the size, the scope of this is amazing.
And the term national champion.
It's outstanding. What's the takeaway here?
Well, first of all, I'll circle back to the beginning, the intro. about all these common themes we have in the sports that we talk about. It doesn't matter if we're talking about tennis or basketball or golf or now pulling, that those themes of hard work and dedication and dreams and can I do it and all this hard work ever going to pay off for me? And obviously it did for Adrian, and that's exciting because that's what dreams are made of in sports legacies, and that's why we talk about them. Side note also to Brad, congratulations on 3-time host. You get to join an exclusive club. We get jackets at 5.
I'm just really glad to get another front row seat one more time. It's pretty cool. Thank you guys too for all the podcasts that you do. I've always regretted not saying that, but saving all of these stories and everything, it's a really important thing, and I know a lot of people really enjoy it.
Well, we love it. And Adrian, thank you for coming in and telling some of your story, and I've really enjoyed that. I just appreciate you sharing with the audience. And folks, I want to thank you for listening to Show Me Sports Legacies.